For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
All right, we're going to jump back to our earlier question, and it is, skeptics on oldearth.org have asserted that if you believe in a young Earth global flood model, you would expect all rocks to show evidence of a cataclysmic origin, but they don't. They say that most rocks give evidence of slow, gradual deposition. What is the best way to respond to this?
Okay, I can jump in here if you want, give my initial thoughts.
Go for it.
Okay, so first of all, I point to one of my slides saying polystrate trees. Those take a very short amount. They need a short amount of time to form, just simply because of the origin of them. And again, going back to the fossils themselves, I mean, you've got the jellyfish there that was formed incredibly quickly. You have a lot of pressure pressing down on that specimen in order to create that imprint. And as well, I mean, I know that Diane Eager is our biomedical biologist thing. I never remember her whole title. Sorry, Diane. But she has done experiments with fossil ink, which is very interesting. They found fossilized ink from a squid, taken it into the lab, and we've actually managed to write with fossil ink. Interesting. So you look all across the fossil record, you're seeing all of these fossil specimens and these polystrate trees that, again, have had their roots ripped off. They've got no branches, basically no bark, and they are lying vertically. Now, Creation Research has actually done some investigation into this. We've done a little experiment, taken a whole bunch of sticks and dumped them in a big sort of pot of water. And we've observed what's happened. Now, something very interesting happens. Some fall horizontally, so they just sink down as they become waterlogged, but something very interesting happens. What happens is that one end of some of them will become waterlogged. Now, this in turn will turn the stick vertical, and it will slowly sink down like that. And it'll land vertically or at a slight angle, which shows how polystrate trees form. Again, it's a small scale, but you can scale that up because it's the same materials and it's the same water. But you know, you've got to look at certain things in the fossil record and go, hang on, how did this form? But you know, you've got to look at certain things in the fossil record and go, hang on, how did this form? And again, you've got dinosaurs that have drowned. You've got living fossils as well that are perfectly preserved. And you've got feathers being preserved as well. These are cataclysmic events. These are incredibly rapid burial events. And you've got rocks that bend as well. We didn't put this in the presentation, but you can search online where you've got strata that actually curve round. Interesting, because rocks shouldn't curve. So that should have formed when the rock was soft, or the sediment or deposit, whatever you want to call it, was soft. That should have formed at that point and is then hardened into that position. You take a rock, you can't go, ooh, no, can't do that. It'll just go because it's hard and brittle. If you're looking at a strata, you're looking at hard rock. You've got, you know, limestone, you've got sandstone, you've got, you know, you've even got, you know, even harder types of rock. I mean, I'm trying to sort of scourge my mind for all the different names, and for some reason I'm thinking of Minecraft. You've got bedrock. That's the one I'm looking. Bedrock. There you go. Incredibly hard rock. But you've got to realise that you look across the entire world, you're seeing these entirely huge deposits, all deposited at one time. These don't form multiple different millions of years. For instance, you know, you take a scientist, take him to a polystrate tree, you take him to the same rock deposit 100 miles away. They don't see a polystrate tree. You ask them, okay, so which one's which? You know, is it millions of years, or is it, you know, was it formed rapidly? Now, the scientist who's looking at the polystrate tree will go, oh, okay, well, I mean, there's a fossilized tree in the middle of it, so yeah, so that must have formed rapidly in order for that to have been fossilized. Otherwise, it would have rotted away. And then the other scientists will go, oh, no, these are several billions of years, millions of years, because they don't see a perfectly straight tree, but they're the same exact formation. Your worldview dictates what you believe. And it's very interesting to see just how far of a reach that's gotten into our society when you're talking about an issue of old Earth and young Earth, cataclysmic, event. You've got all of these things that are perfectly preserved in the fossil record. And again, you've got things that were preserved very quickly, like, for instance, dinosaur bones that have got soft, malleable tissue inside. That doesn't form from a long time ago. And again, another issue with old Earth creationism is the issue of sin. Where does sin come from? Where does it fit in? God created everything very good. Now, there would be no death and destruction, but that's what we see all throughout the fossil record is death. That's literally what it is. It's death of something. It's been preserved. So where does sin fit into all of that? I've never really gotten a very valuable answer. So I'll hand over to Joe because I've had my 2 cents on that one.
Okay. If you want to talk about how do you find, we did a whole program, right, called How Do You Recognize Flood Deposits? And you can use a whole number of things. You can go onto our YouTube channel and find it. It was a fairly recent one. I say recent, it was this year that I did for Answers in Genesis, another big organization. And they had a big conference, right? And we did stuff for them. And what we looked in is what evidence are you specifically looking for if you're looking for evidence that a flood laid down these deposits. And then we looked to scale it up to a global flood scenario, right? And I'll use the example of the research paper, the first ever research paper which I did, right, which was published through the university that I was doing at the time, which looked at Hunstanton. Hunstanton's a fairly small little deposit, right? It's chalk. It's part of the Upper Cretaceous in Norfolk in the UK. It's sort of tucked out of the way, but it's part of the global chalk deposits, right? And we looked in particular at one formation in it called the Hunstanton Formation, which is a red chalk formation, to look at the fossils in there to ask, were these fossils buried in a shallow marine environment that slowly settled over hundreds, if not thousands of years? In fact, it was over 1.2 million years, if you want to go by the secular dates, or was it formed very quickly? Now, the way you can tell some indications of this include, do fossils have evidence of transportation? Now, transportation means that fossils were moved into place and didn't live, die, slowly settle and get buried there. Right? Now, what is some evidence of transportation? Elongated fossils will be pointing the same way. So belemnites, which are squid, long squid-like creatures, if you find them all pointing the same way, the same as with trees, right? Straight trees, you have a few of them standing up, but at the base you have a mass amount of trees, which is a big log jam, all pointing more or less in the same direction, right? So you find belemnites that all point the same way. You find brachiopods and seashells that have been ripped up and turned upside down. Now, they sit in one way in the rock, so when they die they should literally just fall down at the sea floor, the way up that they were living, more or less. These are not, they are all without fail turned upside down. And you also have wood mixed up in there as well. So the fact that you've got evidence of transportation, these fossils have been washed into place. This is not a slow settling environment. They've been washed into place. You have got mixed environments, right, because you have wood and sea creatures buried next to each other. And you also have got fossils which have been tipped up and turned upside down, indicates that it's been a fairly rapidly moving water that's actually washed these into place. So there are a number of evidences that you can look to see how has this actually been formed. And when you scale it up to a worldwide scale, that's when you get, hang on a minute, these are worldwide deposits, right? Now, if you want the perspective of somebody who was an atheist, you can actually stream on our streaming site, creationresearchlive.com, right? We have all of our content on there. That's not free. That's on YouTube. You pay a small thing to just stream it. You don't even have to download anything, right? You just stream it straight off the internet. There's a fascinating thing on there called Flood or Folly by Dr. Ron Neller. Now, Ron was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in anything to do with God, right? But he came across evidence of a massive flood working as a geomorphologist in China. And he said, hang on a minute, the evidence from the fossils, the evidence from the deposits, the evidence that I can see working as a geomorphologist shows that this had to have been a really big flood. In fact, it had to be a flood on a worldwide scale. And so when he tried to actually publish this, he was completely knocked out of the park. You can't publish any reference to anything of a worldwide flood. but why not? The evidence is pointing that way. And he kept pushing it, and he kept pushing it as an atheist, right? To the point that he was actually told, look, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to essentially let you go. We're going to have to lose your job over this, right? Because he kept pushing this thing which did not fit in the secular paradigm. And feeling rather dejected, he then left his university, not knowing why he had really been let go. And it wasn't until a friend opened up the Bible, held it under his nose and said, there's your flood, that he actually realized why this was so controversial. And he actually became a Christian through that. But it was interesting that he recognized the evidence of a worldwide flood coming from a purely secular, atheistic background. Right? And the evidence really is there, but it requires you to think outside the box, particularly the box that Charles Lyell put all of science in when he set out to destroy the Bible and to remove scripture from people's thinking. His entire aim, he openly admitted, was to remove science from the Bible, remove the Bible from science, rather, remove free science from Moses was his exact quote. Right? He wanted to get rid of the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the creation, Noah's flood, the Tower of Babel, and the law of God. It was a specifically anti-Christian agenda, and he went out there to remove that. He put all of scientific thinking into a single box, which was labeled, the present is the key to the past, and as a result, you have to actually step away from that philosophical assumption, that ideology, to actually look around the world that you've been given and say, hang on a minute, where does the evidence actually lead you? So go and watch How to Recognize a Flood Deposit. That goes into a lot more depth than we can do here. But the little example that I used at Hunstanton can be applied just about anywhere in the world, and you'll find that the evidence clearly shows it is a rapid global water-based deposit.
Wow, awesome answers from the both of you. Incredibly thorough. I appreciate that. Just fascinating information.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to hit that like button. It really does help. And subscribe if you enjoy the content and want to see more, and find more of us on our main channel on Team Standing for Truth. This is Matt Man. Until next time.